All right, so up next is our Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, March 16th. Would the clerk, I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Council members Brown,
Here.
Colbrook,
Here.
Hersey,
Here.
Jacobson,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
Wu,
Here.
All right. First up, we have approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. This was on March 2nd, 2020. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
That was moved by Mary Alice and seconded by Alderman Bill Brown. Are there any additions, or I'm sorry, are there any corrections or amendments? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, that motion passes. Minutes are approved. Any additions to the agenda this evening? Seeing none. Public input. I don't have any cards in front of me. We were asking folks not to turn cards in if they did not, if they wish to address the council, but not by voice. Is there anyone who wishes by voice to address the council in the audience this evening? Seeing none, we did have an update from Tim Bannon, but that has been rescheduled for another date. Are there any staff reports?
Could I just make a quick update?
Yeah, of course.
I do want to just take the opportunity before I give the quick update to say how just phenomenal all of our staff are being. They're seeing their friends and family members, being sent home for various reasons. Some of them will not be paid because there's no work for them, and other ones are being sent home because they, their places of business are allowing remote work. We're not set up for remote work. As the mayor said, we're trying to catch up on that front. But, we've had a wonderful commitment of people coming to the office and practicing all the good practices so that we can keep things going. And I just want to give a shout out to our staff because they're really stepping up and being, we're proud of them. They're wonderful. Just want to give you a couple updates. Was there clapping? There was. Yes. Thank you. We gave an update. I gave an update a week or two ago about bid openings for several transportation projects. Those are still on schedule. We've shifted to a virtual format because we typically invite people in for that, but that'll allow us to keep on schedule. And then the other thing I wanted to announce is that IDOT has started work on University Avenue, and the speed limit on University Avenue was scheduled to be lowered to 30 miles an hour after the construction was done, but IDOT, especially given the fact that construction would be ongoing, they have changed the speed limit starting today, so that happened before the project really got under construction, and it won't wait then, and then it will continue as a permanent change. So just those few updates.
Thank you, Carol. Any other staff reports or updates? All right. First up, we have ordinance number 2020-03-009, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of certain real estate, specifically 1107, thank you, North Gregory Street. Community Development.
Thank you. So this is a request to purchase a single-family house at 1107 North Gregory for continued use for transitional housing. So Rosecrans has operated it for transitional housing. It's been operated since 2013 for transitional housing. But Rosecrans now would like to focus on some of their other services and would like to return this property to the city. If we purchase it for the $0, as is in the ordinance, we will continue to operate it for transitional housing, just like we do 2 other units in the city. So it's imperative that affordability of this property remains. If it does not remain affordable per HUD definitions, the city will need to return to HUD $200,000. The best way to guarantee affordability is to own the property. So we are asking that we buy this back for $0, and the CD Commission at their February meeting has recommended that we do so.
Thank you, Lori. Are there any questions for staff from council? Mary Alice?
I'd like to move
to City Council with recommendation for approval. Ordinance number 2020-03009, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of certain real estate at 1107 North Gregory Street with a recommendation for approval to City Council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Are there any further discussion from council? I just had one quick question, Lori. I did not know, and I kind of assumed when reading this that we operated transitional housing as a government body. Is that correct?
We have 2 units. One's on Wiley and one's on Division.
Interesting.
So this would be our third.
So this, who oversees that program?
Community Development or Grants Division with assistance from our Code Compliance Inspector.
Interesting. I'd love to hear more about it sometime.
We'll set up a virtual meeting to discuss that.
Thanks. All right. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, that ordinance passes. Next up, we have ordinance number 2020-03-014, an ordinance approving an amendment to a planned unit development at 1208 Bradley Avenue. Plan case number 2396, PUD 20. Lily Wilcox. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Very well.
Good evening, everybody. I promise to wipe that down afterwards. So I wanted to, before we get started, let you know that the petitioner is on the phone tonight for questions. Lori Edwards from the Annex Group, representing Union Development Holdings, LLC, and Brian Bradshaw from BKB Engineering in Champaign, the site engineer for the Phase 2 proposed development, are both on the phone, or I'm hoping they are still on the phone.
Yes, we're here.
Thank you, Lori Edwards.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Brian Bradshaw. To get started, the requester asks to build a by right affordable housing development on a vacant lot to the west of the One North apartment complex along Bradley Avenue. As the parcel is currently part of a PUD, without an amendment, any new development would be required to generally conform to the site plan of the Melrose Apartments of Urbana PUD from 1996. The Plan Commission held a public hearing on the PUD amendment request at its March 5th, 2020 meeting. The Commission voted unanimously, 6-0, to recommend approval of the request to exclude the 14.51 acres from the original PUD, which would allow development of the site that meets all requirements of the R4 medium-density multifamily residential zoning district. A little bit of background about the site. The 1982 comprehensive plan includes future aspirations for the North Lincoln Avenue area to be developed as a commercial corridor. By the mid-1990s, the corridor had several hotels, a new gas station, and a retail developments. In 1996, Intergroup Incorporated applied to the city for a comprehensive plan amendment, zoning map amendment, special use permit for a planned unit development, and development agreement for the land that today includes One North, Capstone Quarters, and the vacant 14.51 acres at 1208 Bradley Avenue. That was supposed to be Phase 2 of the what is now One North development. One North was the only part of the original planned unit development that was constructed. Phase 2 property has remained undeveloped since the Melrose PUD was approved 24 years ago. And to clarify, the subject property is 1208 Bradley. It says proposed development on your screen. And they request to amend the existing PUD to only encompass the One North property. So this is the proposed amendment to the existing PUD. And that would allow for a by right development next door on the property at 1208. The Plan Commission, the Plan Commission held a public hearing on the request at its March 5th, 2020 meeting. The Plan Commission had a concern that amending the PUD would create a new property line and that the existing buildings on the One North site may be too close to the new property line to meet separation requirements in building code. The Plan Commission asked staff to research this potential issue prior to City Council hearing. Building Safety has reviewed the plans and PUD amendment request and has determined that no issues would be created for the existing buildings on the One North site if the requested amendment is approved. The existing buildings have sprinklers and are at least 20 feet from the new property line. Since the minimum required side yard in the R4 district is 5 feet, any new buildings on the Phase 2 site would be at least 25 feet from the existing buildings, which meets the requirements for building separation. No members of the public spoke in favor of or opposed to the request. And just to clarify, that was if a building burnt down, the buildings are not considered non-conforming to building safety and fire separation. Due to the relatively large size of the Phase 2 property in relation to the whole planned unit development, allowing it to be developed as a proposed is too significant a change to be considered minor. So that's why we're here today and at Plan Commission to discuss a major amendment to the planned unit development. Overall, the plans are quite similar and would develop the site at around the same level of intensity. The proposed development would meet zoning requirements for the underlying R4 zoning district, and the ownership for the Phase 1, One North, and Phase 2 parcels would be separate entities. There is no reason to amend the existing PUD to include the proposed site plan. Amending the PUD to exclude Phase 2 will not affect Phase 1, which is One North, in any way. Phase 1 is currently compliant with the zoning ordinance and will remain so if the amendment is approved. A bit about site connectivity. Prior to the 1982 comprehensive plan, so the last amendment was 1978, Urbana had envisioned Goodwin Avenue extending north past Bradley Avenue to Kenyon Avenue. In 1969, the city of Urbana acquired right-of-way from Lenore Tawney with the intent of building a road at that time of development in the area. By the time the 1982 comprehensive plan was adopted, those plans had been abandoned. The city held the right-of-way until 1996 when Intergroup proposed a student housing complex on the Melrose PUD site, which required various approvals and a development agreement. The development agreement included that the city would abandon the Goodwin Avenue right-of-way and that Intergroup would pay a fee to the city to use the city-owned stormwater detention basin that serves the area. The right-of-way was returned to Ms. Tawney, who sold it to Intergroup. Extending Goodwin Avenue through the site to Kenyon Road is also not feasible because in 1987, the city built a ditch and culvert on the city-owned right-of-way north of the site, which serves as an important function of stormwater management. The approved site plan for the Melrose PUD shows no connections for Phase 2 site to Bradley Avenue to the south or to Federal Drive to the north, which is Exhibit F in the staff report. Phase 2 was planned to only connect to Phase 1 to the east. If the PUD is amended and Phase 2 site is developed, any new development will most likely connect to Bradley Avenue and would preferably connect to Federal Drive as well. The proposed development from the Annex Group would connect both Bradley Avenue and Federal Drive and would be a by right development which would meet all requirements of the zoning ordinance, which is, you can see in Exhibit E. And please note the proposed development plans are preliminary and are provided for informational purposes. As far as relating to the comprehensive plan, this proposed development, it meets Goal 40, making affordable housing available for low-income and moderate-income households. Goal 41, promote access to employment opportunities for all Urbana residents, and that this development generally meets the goals and objectives of the 2005 comprehensive plan. Goal 40 and Goal 41 relate to the proposed amendment, and I'm going to just read a little bit about the affordable housing. It was in the Plan Commission packet, but I would like to expand a little bit on that. The applicant is seeking funding for this project from Urbana Allocated Home Funds and State of Illinois Housing Development Authority this spring. Home funds come from the Housing and Urban Development Program that seeks to address local housing needs. Urbana, Champaign, and Champaign County form the HOME Consortium and receive funding each year through the HOME program. New construction of housing is one objective of the HOME program, and this project would help meet that objective. Additionally, the state of Illinois administers a tax credit program for affordable housing creation. The applicant plans to submit an application to IDA for this project for a non-competitive 4% tax credit program, LIHTC, that funds the creation or renovation of affordable housing units. Though the site is preliminary, the project appears to respect the Urbana zoning ordinance and has additional amenities such as a shared use path through the site. The site is proposed as 220 units. Illinois Housing Development Authority has approved this site as a preliminary project assessment, and you can access that through their website online. In Section 3, Section 13.3, it lists criteria for creation of planned unit developments. No criteria is given to explicitly address the removal of land from an existing planned unit development, as is this case. The staff report addresses that criteria for approval of a planned unit development. I'm going to skip and read the summary of findings, which really addresses that. The first of the summary of findings, Union Development Holdings, LLC requests an amendment to the Melrose Apartments of Urbana planned unit development for the property at 1208 Bradley Avenue. The applicant requests to exclude this property from the existing PUD and develop the property to R4 medium-density multiple family residential zoning district. The property is undeveloped and 14.51 acres in size, or 37% of the existing PUD. At its March 5th, 2020 meeting, the Plan Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval to the City Council of the amendment to the Melrose Apartments of Urbana planned unit development. The applicant will be asking for funding from the State of Illinois' Department of Housing Development Authority, and City of Urbana will consider it for a home program to construct affordable apartments on the site. The subject property is suitable for medium-density residential uses, like the proposed R4 medium-density multiple family residential zoning district. The exclusion of this property from the existing PUD and development to the underlying zoning district is conducive and convenient to the public. Additionally, the request to develop the property to R4 medium-density multifamily residential zoning district would allow the owner to build. This would be generally compatible with the multifamily residential future land use designation of the 2005 Urbana Comprehensive Plan. The existing PUD is consistent with the purpose and goals of Section 13-3, and the proposed exclusion of the subject property does not affect the existing PUD. City Council has the following options in Plan Case 2396-PUD 20. This is the original. First option, approve the ordinance approving the planned unit development amendment. Second, approve the ordinance approving the planned unit development amendment with conditions. And 3, deny the ordinance approving the planned unit development amendment. The recommendation. At its March 5th, 2020 meeting, the Plan Commission voted unanimously, 6 ayes and 0 nays, to forward the amendment to the Melrose Apartments of Urbana planned unit development to City Council with a recommendation to approve the amendment. Staff likewise recommends approval.
Thank you, Lily. Are there questions? Mary Alice?
Lily, that was an excellent report because you answered every single one of my questions. Thank you. I have one pending question that I couldn't quite follow in the Planning Commission's discussion. So the original property that was in the PUD, how many lots was that originally? Was it 2? Or 2 property lines?
That's tricky. I believe it was one property. It's tricky because immediately following after that long list of cases, later that year there was a major subdivision that was approved. So then that created the 3 lots. And do note that that lot line right here, as you can kind of see on your screen, doesn't exactly line up with Goodwin Avenue down here, which on a almost 40-acre parcel like this is kind of hard to see, but you can kind of see it when you're standing at the site.
So in general, if you have a PUD, which means you're putting together several lots to build a structure that might not be in conformity with our existing rules, but you give something in return, right? If you break apart a piece like this, does that automatically create a property line? I'm just, that piece is a little ambiguous to me.
Yeah, so a planned unit development can encompass multiple property lines. And then the property owner may be foreseeing potential feasibility issues with their original plan, I don't know. But a property owner could then subdivide it but still be under the existing approved planned unit development.
So this is similar to a subdivision.
It was a subdivision afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Bill Brown.
So with the PUD, they didn't complete it as originally designed. Usually when we pass a PUD, there's a clause in there that says must be built in conformance with the design submitted or something like that. And it looks like we at least provided some kind of drainage or stormwater retention in exchange for some payment. I don't know how much that was, but it's possible that as part of that PUD give and take, we gave them a pretty low rate or took a hit on providing that drainage. So we gave up something in exchange for giving them for them to develop, and then we also gave them the right-of-way. I mean, my concern, I wrote to you after the Plan Commission meeting. I think during the Plan Commission meeting, the site connectivity was either not there or a lot shorter, right?
Oh, the discussion?
Well, the paragraph, because...
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it wasn't there.
It wasn't there. I really appreciate you adding that, and I think it would be good to kind of add something like that in any big case, or any case where there's connectivity issues. I think it should be a kind of a separate study. But if you actually look at the Exhibit A, I think shows a better overview of the connectivity. Can you bring that up? Yeah, that's fine. So Goodwin goes up to Bradley, and I've tried to go from campus, say, to the water company on Federal Drive on my bicycle, and I ended up riding across the field. And you can do that because you have a mountain bike or whatever, and you're a mountain biker. But on my bike, it wasn't very much fun. And if you go to Lincoln Avenue, there's these little 2 or 3 foot wide sidewalks. And I'm not going to ride on Lincoln Avenue unless I absolutely have to, and I do sometimes in that area. That's the only place really where I ride on Lincoln Avenue. So connectivity there is just horrible. And if you live in this neighborhood, in Beardsley Avenue, Eureka Street, King Park, and you want to go to, or say you work at the Holiday Inn, you have to walk clear over to Lincoln and up, and it's not a pleasant walk. Or if you work, in some of the industrial area, I guess there's also a proposed potential craft grower going to be up there or something to employ some people. It's just you either have to go a quarter mile one way or half a mile the other way. There's no connectivity up there. So I was hoping that we could somehow get that right-of-way back or get an easement for at least, at a minimum, a bicycle or walking path that if we can't afford it now, maybe it's something we could apply for a grant for because it definitely would improve connectivity. I was hoping also that if we could actually someday build the good one clear up to the access drive, that it would provide a nice route for MTD to actually make a loop there so they could go do a clockwise loop, and the people where the main population is at 1 North, 1 South, Melrose Place, that now have to cross the street at Lincoln Avenue, on Lincoln Avenue where there's no crosswalks when they get off the bus, would be able to always get off on the right side and not have to cross the street. So
I was going to suggest that same kind of thing, that they extend Goodwin as far as possible because of the fact that that's a street, I believe too, and this is in my ward, that has to have it needs to go through. It needs to be extended And if there's any way that that can happen, and call it Goodwin, don't change it to some nice little cute name that you have to drive up into the projects. I don't know if that's what it's going to be, but hello. So that I think I agree with Bill with that. I think that it definitely there needs to be a road that goes all the way through, because I watch those students and I pray for them every time I see them crossing Lincoln Avenue when the MTD lets them off. And this would be an excellent alternative to that. So
I'm not sure how we get there. And I know from their design that part, the design, I think I said in an email to you, I kind of take with a grain of salt, because this would give them a by right development. And we can see how the original PUD changed a couple of times when before it was built. And their design, there it is, thanks. Their design that, at least they've submitted doesn't seem to use that stretch much. So if that was what was built, at least that would leave some potential option in the future, maybe to put something through there. And I also see that you've drawn in the yellow path, which would be a potential connectivity for a bicycle path, say up to Federal Drive, which wouldn't be quite as good as going more toward the hotel side. But it would be a big difference. But then that would be, if we made that actually a bike route, that would be the only private part of a bike route in our bike plan. All of our bike plan routes and everything are on public streets or public ways. And we wouldn't have any control over it, if they wanted to change that or something. So I guess I just wanted to know how much you've explored that option, and are there ways that we could put in an easement? I know that northern part is being used for drainage. It would be pretty expensive, maybe, to build a road there, although we have lots of roads with big drainage tiles under them. And if you didn't want to actually build a road and just make it a multi-use path, or like I suggested, maybe a multi-use / transit path, that would, if we could somehow allow for that in the future. I wonder, if you guys have explored that and what your thoughts on it are.
I'm really glad you asked, because transportation issues are very near and dear to all of planning staff's heart, as well as many of rest of staff, of course. So if you don't mind, I have like a little prepared, because there's a lot going on there. So I'm going to try to unpack that very, very briefly as I can, about Goodwin Avenue. So as you can see, Melrose re-subdivided off the Capstone Quarters parcel and the Phase 2 parcel, and they didn't really keep a whole lot of, they moved the property line to better facilitate their built structures on the Phase 2 site. If Goodwin Avenue proceeded through the site, the city-owned right-of-way to the north, it houses important stormwater infrastructure in the area. This project was a part of a lot. Basically, that stormwater infrastructure, it could be moved to underneath the road. It would be very expensive and very costly. And Shannon Baranek from Public Works is here to address some of those cost questions about roads. Staff has met with MTD, and I'm going to just briefly paraphrase. Buses, of course, cannot be expected to drive down the private access to parking. MTD has met with us as staff, and if the development had a public road rather than access to parking running through the site as it's currently proposed, they would not want to route buses through this site. They are being told right now through their own strategic planning process that they need to go more to arterial road routes. Those staff and MTD are very concerned about the safety of people getting off of Lincoln Avenue, trying to cross Lincoln Avenue to get to one north and one south. And there is in the plan to be a safety study to hopefully brainstorm and design some kind of solution to this. But Bradley Avenue has a couple of other problems with it. It has a surface conflict with Canadian National Railroad. So currently MTD does not use Bradley Avenue and likes to stay away from it. It does have a bus route going up Romine. Would be interested in Goodwin. as it would bring it closer to arterial and but they would still, the Lincoln Avenue along 1 North would still be routed the same way as it currently stands. In a perfect world, if money was not an object and Goodwin could be extended through that site, there would be other issues. But they did say that they could maybe possibly make that loop in a perfect world. Building a road is very cost prohibitive, as we all know. If grants, so as I mentioned earlier, Grants Division is considering this as a possible application for home funds because it's creating affordable housing units. And in that process, there is some ability to talk about that. And that is maybe where a really reasonable ask could be the access or an easement for the shared use path. That's something that I've discussed with the applicant. The applicant can talk further about to give them possibly infrastructure costs. And again, these are just thinking about this issue. Infrastructure costs could go for a public road, and if that was the case, if grants gave them a lot of federal dollars, there could be a lot of other hidden costs that are attached to that. So federal dollars comes with federal grant strings attached. And so that would, just to oversimplify that problem, it would be like giving the project $10 and then all of a sudden construction costs are $30. And so that would be very difficult. On the other hand, and this is really just exploring this issue, if the city gave general fund dollars to the project to see a road built, either as Goodwin Extended or as Federal Drive, all parking would have to be relocated off of this access area, forcing more of the site to be paved parking with no additional affordable housing units being created. The natural space in the center would likely have to be reconfigured as building space or parking spaces. And the amount of money needed to build a road through the site is unknown. I can't speak to that. Again, Shannon might be able to answer more questions, but is likely to be expensive. So we have talked a lot about it.
I appreciate all the reasons you've given for saying no. Did you think of any reasons, any ways to do it? I mean, you guys
Yeah.
are the ones who are supposed to come up with the solutions. I'm not trying to be, too argumentative. I'm just saying, I hear a lot of, this is why we can't do it. I've proposed a couple things that, maybe didn't work. Did you come up with anything that might work?
So I've only explored the possibility of general fund dollars or possibility of grants, infrastructure dollars. There's certainly, I can, keep looking and exploring other options as well.
I appreciate that. I know you're on my side too. It's just really frustrating, and I think there were, probably mistakes made in the past and things given up that probably shouldn't have been given up, but they were expecting a big return and it didn't come back quite as big as they were expecting. But this is a, an opportunity that's going to be lost for forever, possibly.
Never say never, Bill. Other questions for Lily? Mary Alice?
Actually, I had a question for the developer. I was wondering if you could give us a rough estimate of how much your units would cost for somebody to rent there, since this is affordable housing?
Yes, this is Lori Edwards. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Right now, our rents, these are going to be largely 1 and 2 bedrooms with some 3s and 4s, and rents would be roughly $770 for a 1-bedroom, and then up to the 4-bedroom around $1,100. This largely serves household incomes at 60% AMI, as designated by HUD county rent limits that come out annually, and 60% AMI, as some of you may know or may not, is roughly $52,000, I believe, is the max that it would serve. So we typically are looking to serve households from that would be for a family of 4. So a 1-person household might be a $30,000 income. So roughly a $30,000 to $55,000 income is what we're targeting to serve.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sharice?
Yes, I have to leave early. So what
Okay.
I am going to ask is that I would like to make a motion to table this and keep it in committee until I can participate further regarding the discussion, because we are kind of having a lively discussion. So I'd like to make a motion to keep this particular resolution. what
It's
is
an
it?
ordinance.
Ordinance. I don't have the agenda in front of me. In committee until the next committee meeting.
All right, I'll ask for a second.
I'll second that.
All right, there's a second from Bill. Any discussion in council about the move to keep it in committee? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right, this item will be held for the next committee of the whole meeting. All right, next up, we have resolution number 2020-03-015R, a resolution adopting financial policies. Elizabeth Hannon. I believe we've got VERF and fund balance. Eric and Dennis, are you both still with us?
I am with you.
Okay.
Dennis.
Thanks for checking in.
So actually, Don Ho was going to be here to do this tonight, but he couldn't be here. And so what he did was he put the presentation together. And I'm going to play it for you.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
It'll be just like we're on Zoom.
Good evening. My name is Don Ho. I'm the Senior Financial Analyst for the Finance Department. I'm sorry I can't be there tonight. I'm not feeling 100%. And with the whole coronavirus outbreak thing, it would be better for me to stay home. So thank you for your understanding. So before you tonight is the proposed changes to the financial policies. So when we did the financial forecast in January, we mentioned that we would present some changes to the current financial policies before we adopt the budget. So here they are. So there are two sections we would like to revise in the financial policies. The first one is related to the VERF funding, and the second one is related to the general fund reserve. So here are some background on the VERF. So the VERF collects fees from other funds to make sure that we have adequate funds available to purchase equipment and vehicles. So the total value of all of our capital assets in the VERF is about $13.5 million. Our current practice. So our current practice is to set aside funds in advance of assets replacement. So rather than pre-funding at 100% of the replacement cost, the city current policy is to fund at 90% of the replacement cost. And this is very common among municipalities. Also, that the city currently has no minimum fund balance requirement for the VERF. So we created a projection with 3 different funding scenarios, and on top of that we also added a proposed minimum fund balance requirement for the VERF, which is at 10% of the total assets value. So as you can see, at the 90% level of funding, which is the blue line here, fund balance for the VERF remains about $2 million over the proposed minimum fund balance requirement for the majority of the forecast period. It is a good thing. However, it means that we would take more money than necessary out of the general fund, since the majority of the transfer come out of the general fund. At the 80% level of funding, which is a gray line here, fund balance for the VERF will be below the proposed minimum fund balance requirement from fiscal year 38 to 41. So it is not a feasible option unless we don't have a minimum fund balance requirement. And then at the 85% level of funding, fund balance for the VERF stays above the proposed minimum fund balance requirement for the whole forecast period. In fiscal year 2038, that's when we have a lot of equipment and vehicles scheduled for replacement, and that's why you see the big drop there. But even then, it's still above the minimum fund balance requirements, so that's very positive. So staff recommends adding language specifying a minimum fund balance requirements of at least 10% of the value of assets. Then this will provide some cushions against any price fluctuations in the future. And staff found that the 85% funding level would not only allow the VERF to be sustainable without issuing debt, but also will provide some relief on the general fund. The savings is about $80,000 in fiscal year 21. So the next section that I would like to talk about is the general fund reserve. And so, as you know, general fund reserve is the cornerstone of our financial flexibility, because with this money, it gives us options to respond to unexpected events such as natural disasters, changes in legislations, or diseases like coronavirus, like what we're experiencing now. So our current practice is we have our reserve set at least 15% of recurrent expenditures, and then it can only be depleted below 10% only in the event of catastrophic need. And if it dips below 15%, the finance director will recommend a strategy for replenishment. So we follow the Government Finance Officer Association, or GFOA, risk analysis guidelines. And based on this analysis, we found 3 primary risks. The first one is sales tax revenue. The city is currently dependent a lot on sales tax revenue. It is about 30% of our total revenue in the general fund. The second one is the potential for the city's infrastructure to fail, and as you know, we have a backlog of capital needs, and that is also considered a risk. The third one is the dependency of other funds on the city's general fund. And so the city's general fund supports other funds such as the capital improvement fund and retained risk funds and some other funds, and this is also considered a risk. We also compared the minimum fund balance requirements to different cities in Illinois, and it is in the memo. The table is in the memo. As you can see, there is really no defined requirement for each city, and that makes it hard to determine. But the general rule is that governments that maintain a higher reserves are better positioned to deal with funding issues in bad times. So since we have a good budget year, then I think it is prudent for us to use a portion of a budget surpluses to help create and sustain or increase the size of our general fund reserve. And I just want to stress this, but putting money into reserve is a more fiscally prudent action than spending surplus funds on new or expanded programs. So staff recommends increasing the minimum fund balance from at least 15% to at least 20%, and that the reserve will be depleted below 15% instead of 10% in the event of catastrophic need. And the last one is that if the reserve dips below 20% instead of 15%, the finance director will recommend a strategy of replenishment over a period of no more than 3 to 5 years. Elizabeth will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thanks,
Thank
Don.
you, Don. That was great.
Elizabeth, do you have any other further comments before we take
What-
questions?
One thing I wanted to mention, since we are in the midst of responding to an emergency here, is that we're recommending increasing the fund balance to a minimum of 20%, and I know the timing seems odd. Depending on what happens here, we may not be able to achieve that next year. I think there's just a lot that's unknown now, but I think it still makes sense to adopt that as our policy. And if we're not able to achieve that in next year's budget, we'll point that out as a variance from council policy. I think it makes sense regardless in the long term.
Okay. Bill Colbrook?
I've just got one question. On page 404, it says if the reserve dips below 20%, the finance director will recommend a strategy to replenish the reserve over a period of no more than 3 to 5 years. Could you give me some examples of what those strategies would be?
It could be something like controlling our level of expenditures over a period of time so that we can build reserves where we might otherwise be able to grow our expenditures or add new programs and services.
Mary Alice?
So I think VERF is like our favorite topic when it comes to finance. Every year we revisit this. So last year, I believe, we also talked about VERF, and I'm wondering if you can tell me, I didn't look up the different changes. So what's the difference from last year to this year?
So last year, we were asking to go to a 70% funding level, which would have required us to issue debt periodically to smooth out the valleys when the fund balance got too low. So this year, the 85% funding level that we're recommending would not require us to issue any debt.
So essentially, we're saving more money than spending more money. If we're going up, if 85% is basically in reserves, right? So VERF is used so that we have the money to purchase the bigger items down the line. I just call it like the deep saving, so we have enough money. So we're actually saying we're going to save more money than we did last year.
Yeah, we'll set aside
We'll
more
set
money
aside,
into
yes.
the VERF to pay for future equipment purchases. Correct.
Okay. So, and then there's just two things that this is asking us to do. The first one is to increase from 15% to 20% of reoccurring charges in the general fund. And the second one is to increase from 70% to 85% for the VERF. I just want to confirm those are the two things we're being asked to do.
That's it.
Thank you.
And establish a minimum fund balance for the VERF, which we do not have.
Yes. So three things.
Three things.
Three things.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Eric.
No, this is Dennis.
I'm sorry, Dennis.
I also have a
I'm just sort of curious, as I look at the proposed or projected VERF balance as it progresses from 2020 onward into the future. In the year 2038, it suddenly dives, and I'm wondering how that is projected to take such a downturn in something that's 18 years away.
So this is the
I
result.
would have expected that maybe we would be diving, next year. But it's kind of interesting. Is there a reason that the graph is like dipping so low in 2038 that you would expect it to be so low?
So it just has to do with the timing of purchases. We have every piece of equipment that's included in the VERF scheduled out and projected out. And so there are times, for example, perhaps when we have to replace a very expensive piece of equipment like a ladder truck that costs about currently $1.25 million. And so very large purchases have that kind of impact, but also if just in terms of the timing, a number of purchases fall kind of on the same schedule, that could do that as well.
I see. So it's something that's known, and you're trying to show that we are going to have one cataclysmic spending experience to replace needed equipment.
I would not describe it as cataclysmic if it's planned.
Well, there you go. That's putting it a positive spin.
Eric.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there are reasonable projections that are darker than many people have suggested, that we're going to have to, keep this social isolation policy, including having bars and restaurants closed, until there's a vaccine, which is a year away. So let's suppose that hypothesis is true. How big a hole is that going to put in our budget?
So, I mean, certainly we're probably closer to the worst case scenario that we looked in the financial forecast if that happens. But, I mean, I'm not going to put a number on it because there's a lot that's unknown at this point. But certainly it's going to have an impact.
Okay.
Further questions for Elizabeth? Diane, do you have something?
Not a question. I can't resist this comment, though, is we're in much better position to weather this emergency now than we would have been 3 years ago. So, and that's due to your decisions and support for these policies. So, and you, thank you.
Okay. You're very welcome.
Elizabeth,
Thanks
I had...
for your leadership, yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just going to respond to the mayor. You're very welcome, and thank you for your leadership.
She says you're welcome. Elizabeth, I had one in particular question. At the end of Don's presentation, and it's kind of put into the changes, is the reserve will be depleted below 15% only in the event of a catastrophic need. Are we, I know we're changing practices, and it's possibly too early to even know, but is there any indications that we're going to anticipate catastrophic need in the near future? We're going to have to pull money out of the general fund to pay for something that's not coming in anymore. Do you know what actions the governor has been taking that might be affecting revenues coming from the state, anything like that?
So right now, based on what I know, the issue is more that we're going to lose revenue as businesses are shut down. We'll probably have some additional expenses, but at this point, I can't think of any they're going to be probably as large as the revenue loss.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions for Elizabeth? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Yeah, I can do that.
Go ahead, Dennis.
I make a motion that we pass resolution number 2020-03-015R, a resolution adopting a financial policies for the financial year 2020 and beyond, with recommendation of approval going to City Council.
Gotcha.
Second.
All right, that's a motion from Dennis and a second from Bill Brown. Is there any discussion amongst council members? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. And that motion passes. All right, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.